you have to adhere to. The problem is this: are we providing the incentive for people to start a business? Bernie Marcus said this, late last year when he was asked, could he still believe that he could start Home Depot in this environment that we have today? He said no. And that's the problem. The problem is looking and seeing not how I'm going to try to come and make a job. How do I set the conditions for you to be able to create the environment where you can create a business?
Congressman, Apple Computers started in a garage. You say garage, it's a ratty business, but Apple Computers started there. Hewlett-Packard started there. And when you go to the banks,
and Larry,
the fees, they'll kill you.
Larry, we'll deal with that with the mayor when we have him come out here, but we're going to go and move on to our next person who'd like to ask a question. John Sweeney. I have 3 cards for John. Is John Sweeney here to ask your question? John, here you go. I don't know which one you want to do, but I know you have a 17th Amendment question. You've got a
Well, you know what?
I'll
kind of dovetail off the gas. There's a story today in the paper that talks about the Canadian Prime Minister said that our gas, we're buying it at a discount in Canada. That's going away because they don't consider us to be a reliable business partner. They can't rely on us to buy the gas because we didn't do the pipeline, which goes probably Republicans with the technicality saying that we didn't allow them to do a study, even though a study was going on for 3 years. So then there's also a story today that talks about how Obama is giving 5 of the Lucie Islands that are part of the United States to Russia without them giving us any consideration. They're all oil-rich islands. How is that even going on? I mean, it seems like you hear about that, you hear about the data center that's being built by the NSA out in the desert. So basically all of our freedoms of privacy are being taken away because every single activity we have is being monitored. And it feels like that we don't have a voice, that we're already in a totalitarian system. And it's just kind of like how Russia is viewed. Russia went from a communist system to supposedly a democratic system, and it was really just a Kremlin with democratic practice. So, and it feels like we're that way now. And so how can Congress treat people like you make a difference when the cards in Congress are so stacked against you?
Keep fighting. But I will tell you
well,
this.
Congressman, will you please repeat kind of what he said, because some people back here weren't able to hear.
The bottom line of the question is, really the gist of what you're saying is, how do you contend in an environment where we're supposed to have co-equal branches of government and also a separation of powers? Congress cannot overturn an executive order. The only people that can do something with an executive order is a new chief executive, a new president. We're supposed to have oversight of government activities and agencies, but I'll give you a great example. In the Dodd-Frank law, this new agency was created called the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau. Sounds really nice, but this is an organization that does not answer back to Congress. It answers to the Secretary of Treasury, but yet they have the ability to make almost binding law through regulation. When you look at all the regulations that are coming down from the Environmental Protection Agency, and here's a great example of what I was talking about. When the administrator of the EPA, Lisa Jackson, was brought in front of the House Energy and Commerce Committee, and she was asked a single question: do you take into consideration the economic impact of the regulations that you're producing? And she said no. So, here's a simple card that I carry around. It's like 27 different pieces of legislation passed bipartisan in the House of Representatives, sitting over on Harry's desk. Farm Dust Regulation Prevention Act. The EPA wants to go after farmers for an abundance of dust that they produce. Google up numeric nutrient criteria. The EPA came down with some type of formula that said that farmers in certain municipalities, if they could not produce runoff water that was parts per billion purer than rainwater, they get fined. Now, I'm not a real smart guy, but how do you produce runoff water that is purer than rainwater? But that's what's coming down. And when they were challenged and asked what was the formula used, they said there is no formula. You just have to comply. The state of Florida went into a lawsuit against the EPA over numeric nutrient criteria. So these are the type of things that are happening And I can tell you, all you can do is continue to fight. You know what the most important thing to do is educate you all on what's going on. Because I hate to tell you, this is a republic. And the people that you send to Washington, D.C. are sent by who?
People.
By you.
By the people.
Okay? So, you know, once again, coming back to the question that was asked, you have to make the decision about who you think will go to Washington, D.C. to fight and be your voice, and truly be respectful and come back and present themselves to you, because it's a train wreck.
Well, let me ask you one follow-up question. How's you agree? I was at a town hall that you did in Palm Beach a couple months ago, and I asked this question. I don't know if you really understood it, so I'll ask it again because it dovetails with what you're talking about. And that is, the 17th Amendment took away the state's ability to, and so, you know, and all these people talk about term limits. If we just repeal the 17th Amendment, things that are going on in Alaska right now, where they're being circumvented by the federal government and have no say whatsoever, they would have more control over it because the people who, quite frankly, don't show up to vote wouldn't have the power to put the people in the Senate in place, and they would help balance the powers that are out of balance now.
Well, this is the problem. I mean, the people elected senators to go and be their representative, but the senators are not doing their job. Let's be very honest. 1,071 days. You know what that represents? How long there has not been a budget passed through the Senate. There's only one thing constitutionally mandated we must do, and that's produce a budget. So why aren't you guys calling up Marco Rubio and Senator Bill Nelson saying, why haven't you guys done a budget in over 3 years?
The frustration is, it doesn't matter how many voters you write, how many times you call us.
Who's up for re-election?
Bill Nelson, I think.
Okay. So, I mean, this is the question. Are the people going to come back and say, oh, it's okay, no big deal. You can go back for another 6 years. Yeah. The founding fathers were brilliant in how they established it. Now, you know, talk about the 17th Amendment, we can go back and we can relook that. That really is not the thing that keeps me awake at night. The debt and our deficit and our energy security, our national security really keeps me awake at night. But when you think about if you really want to have an immediate impact on your federal government, every 2 years, House of Representatives, that's why it's called the People's House. All bills must emanate from or come back to the House of Representatives for final approval. We're the guys that hold the money, our appropriations. That's what they're left for. Every 4 years, who do you get to vote on? President. Every 6 years, who do you get to vote on? Senator. You see how they staggered this? But if you do as Plato said, this is one of my favorite quotes. Plato said, those who refuse to participate in politics shall be governed by their inferiors.
Thank you. Congressman West, I'm ready for another question?
Go, I'm fine.
This is
Someone just needs to tell me if there's a golden corral somewhere. That's what I'm
there is nearby.
Okay.
This is Barbara, and I'll tell you a little Barbara. She's been kicked and beat up lately pretty good, but I'll tell you what, she's here tonight and standing tall.
Good evening, Congressman West. I have a question that's been in my heart, a very deep concern. I want to know your stance on stand your ground law, and how do you feel about the Trayvon Martin kid,
Sure.
and that situation. I know it's they are trying to pull something together. I know that Governor Scott said after the investigation, then we will proceed. But if you see what's happening, it's starting to separate people and states and cities. So now we're about to have a serious civil situation that's about to happen in America. We're supposed to be one nation under God, and I think we're about to be divided right here in America. And I just want to know what's your take on that?
Well, you know, I put out a couple of statements already about that. First and foremost, I think that when you talk about the Trayvon Martin case, there are now some very irrational voices that are trying to use this tragedy to promote their own ideological agenda. I hate to tell you, there was a 13-year-old African-American young man who was shot in the head, same time as Trayvon Martin down in West Palm Beach. He's sitting up in the hospital in St. Mary's. No one cares about him. Why? But yet, this case here has gotten all of this national appeal. You think about black-on-black crime, okay? Why is it that we don't really care about the everyday occurrence of black on black crime. All of a sudden, this one has gotten so much appeal. Now, it's a horrible thing to happen for one main reason. An unarmed person was shot and killed.
Yes.
Okay, now, if you're a police officer, and I'm sure the law enforcement officer here will agree with me, if you draw your weapon, discharge your weapon,